Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. You are tuned in to match number 3 of the International Reparation Debate Competition for 2026. So far, two teams have secured their automatic advancement to round 2. Arima North Secondary from Trinidad and Tobago and Mergrove High School from Jamaica. Two teams will be vying to secure yet another slot in round 2. Today we have Goodwood Secondary School from Trinidad and Tobago and CV Bethel Senior High School, the club, coming out of the Bahamas. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Ravon Thomas Matthews, and for the purposes of this match, I will be the chair judge. Welcome back. Of course, this competition simply would not have been possible without some key figures. We want to take this opportunity to give them a shout out. Of course, the University of the West Indies, the Center for Reparation Research, the UE Press, the Jamaican Association for Debating and Empowerment, the University of Hull, and our main partner, the Repair Campaign. Of course, judging this match will not just be I alone. I'm accompanied by two wing adjudicators who will ask to introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Joshua Atkins.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joshua Atkins. I'll be serving as a wing judge in today's match. I'm looking forward to an exciting clash of ideas and contentions in this debate. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Joshua. And of course, my other wing adjudicator, Mr. Shana Jarrett.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Roshana Jarrett, and I will serve as your other wing adjudicator. I too am looking forward to an exciting match, and may the better team win.
Awesome. Thank you very much, my fellow judges on this panel. You've heard a lot from me, but I want to hear from the debaters. I'd like to invite the speakers in proposition from Goodwood Secondary School to introduce themselves.
My name is Destiny Weeks.
My name is Anna Marcella Codrington.
My name is Faith Charles. And we are Goodwood Secondary School.
Awesome. And of course, their opponents from the Bahamas, CV Bethel Senior High School, the club.
My name is Virginia Miller, and I will be the third speaker.
My name is Andrea Nash, and I will be the first speaker. My name is Jada Lindsay, and I will be the second speaker.
All right, and there you have it. Those are the speakers for this debate. The motion before them reads, this House supports the formation of a stronger, unified political and economic bloc among post-colonial states to counter neocolonialism. There's a lot of complex words in that motion, but I'm sure that our debaters will make it stupid simple for us so that we can truly enjoy this match. Now, of course, the rules governing this debate are as follows. First speakers, you will have 7 minutes to present your case. Second speakers, you will have 6 minutes. Third and final speakers for the debate, you will have 5 minutes. The first and last minute of each speech is considered protected time in which no points of information will be allowed. Outside of protected time, points of information are not only allowed, but we absolutely encourage them. Of course, for your viewing pleasure, we have 2 periods of cross-examination. And I'll tell you a little bit more about those 2 periods of cross-examination when we get into it. Now, with all that said, let's get this show on the road. We invite the first speaker for this debate, coming from Goodwood Secondary School, Anna Marcella Codrington, to open this debate. Hear, hear.
Thank you. A good afternoon is extended to Mr. Speaker, honorable judges, up to the opposition and online guests. Why bring this motion? We brought this motion to the House today to highlight a pressing issue to have affected our countries for the past and continue to affect us in all aspects of our societies today. The issue of neo-colonialism in the post-colonial territories. Presently, our fragmented independence, where post-colonial states CARICOM possesses legal sovereignty, but lack economic agency, operates a series of political, vulnerable, competing microeconomies, making us price takers rather than price makers, making us prawns rather than royalty. As recent as January this year, immigrant visa suspensions prove that our individual borders are easily weaponized. Our internal squabble about the U.S. presence within our territories prove we can be easily divided. By following Dr. Eric Williams' vision of becoming a continental force, we replace this vulnerability with true unity and formidability. The point the government proposes are to highlight the cost of remaining fragmented, the benefits of creating stronger united blocks by consolidating our currencies, the benefits of creating formidability through joint economic institutions such as CARICOM, Maritime, Security Organization, and future empowering those also present, creating stronger unified blocks by adopting supranational authority, formidability by producing finished products from our natural resources rather than exporting raw materials. The history of post-colonial era is not a story of true freedom. It is a story of fragmented independence. We were given flags to fly and anthems to sing, but the controls of economic survival remain firmly in the hands of our former colonial masters. We were taught to place high value on our national sovereignty as individual islands, failing to realize that in a global economy designed to take the small and not sovereign, but free. The proposition stands today for the formation of stronger, and by stronger, we mean formidable and competitive, as opposed to vulnerable and accommodative. Unified, by unified, we mean consolidated. Consolidation in our currency and in our power to make decisions. A stronger, unified political and economic bloc. We argue that the only way to end the era of neocolonialism is to move beyond the parameters drawn for us and embrace the power of the collective. Because in the words of Dr. Eric Williams at the initiation of CARICOM, from this day forward, let it be heard, we are no longer a collection of islands. We are a continental force. Let us look at the evidence of what happens when a state tries to stand alone against the tides of history. In 1825, Haiti, the first free Black republic, was met by a fleet of 14 French warships. They were forced to sign a trade arrangement, an indemnity of 150 million gold francs, simply for the audacity to exist. Historians now confirm that this double debt siphoned away 80% of Haiti's national budget for over a century. It was not a debt, it was a financial siege. Additionally, we look at Cuba, where the United Nations reported recently, as recent as 2025, that the decades-long embargo has caused quantifiable damages exceeding $2.1 trillion. Why? Because post-colonial countries treated Cuba as an outsider. We refuse to rally around the West Indies. When we are solitary, we are targets of forced terms and trade squid games. Undoubtedly, if Haiti and Cuba had been part of a unified political and economic bloc, that French fleet would have only attempted to enter our waters, and that embargo would have never seen a birthday. Because when we stand as one, we are no longer a collection of islands. We are a continental force. The opposition will speak of stability, but there is no stability in being tethered to a foreign master's currency. The Federal Reserve's 2025 report reveals that the US dollar controls nearly 60% of global reserves. Why? Because the United States is politically unified and economically integrated. Likewise, the euro, the world's second most important currency at 20% of global reserves, transformed Europe from a collection of warring states into a global financial pillar. We propose a unified Caribbean and post-colonial currency by pooling our foreign exchange reserve from the oil of Guyana to the bauxite of Jamaica. We create a liquidity shield. We stop begging for aid that is actually a high interest leash. And we start settling trade in our own value. Because when we back our own money, we are no longer a collection of islands. We are a continental force. Finally, Mr. Speaker, consolidations turned our geography into a fortress. Neocolonialism plays a role against one another. They tell St. Lucia they will move their hotels to Barbados if taxes aren't lowered. They tell Trinidad they will buy gas elsewhere if environmental standards are too high. They use our ocean as lakes for their grudges and make us pawns in their war. They use our sovereignty as a weapon against us. We propose that the decision-making power in the bloc, rather than only use consensus, to use both supranational authority and consensus. Supranational authority is where member states cede part of their sovereign authority to the joint higher power of the bloc. This has been used successfully by the European Union to create politically and economically stable states, whether it is the control of our blue oceans or our strategic minerals. Through supranational authority, we stop being accommodative force.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That was the first speaker, impassioned Anna Marcella Codrington. Now, to open the debate for the team in opposition, we invite their first speaker, Andrea Nash.
Eric Williams once exclaimed, "The greatest enemy of progress is the illusion of progress." While the motion argues that post-colonial states should form a stronger, unified political and economic bloc to counter neocolonialism, this House must question whether unity alone is either sufficient or effective. Instead, the status quo reveals fragmented economies and unequal bargaining power and states operating at vastly different levels of stability and development. This matters because the motion assumes that forming a stronger, unified political and economic bloc would automatically correct these imbalances. Yet, we, the members of the opposition, urges the House to reject the motion that the formation of a stronger, unified political and economic bloc among post-colonial states would counter neocolonialism. The Prime Minister may attempt to persuade you that post-colonial states are fragmented, independent countries, and the solution is to form a unified bloc. But yet, when examined closely, the truth reveals itself with unmistakable clarity. We, the opposition, initially, unified reparations require country-specific accountability. The formation of a unified bloc neither repairs the historical damage inflicted by colonialism nor guarantees meaningful reparations. Colonialism stole resources, destroyed infrastructure, and inflicted generations of an economic harm that alliances alone cannot undo. Haiti is a powerful example. After gaining independence, Haiti was forced to pay massive reparations to France, crippling its economy for generations, as reported by the New York Times in The Root of Haiti's Misery, Reparations to Enslavers. A political or economic bloc cannot reverse these losses. Another example is the birth of the CARICOM Reparations Commission's 10-point plan for reparatory justice. This plan was designed to address the specific needs tied to each Caribbean nation's colonial history. Reparations require country-specific accountability. There is also no guarantee that compensation would be fairly shared within a bloc, and collective bargaining could reduce pressure on former colonizers to take responsibility for individual harms. Subsequently, a united bloc risks creating a new form of neocolonialism from within. Power does not disappear when countries unite. We fully support reparations for all groups, but forcing distinct historical struggles into a single bloc weakens their power and erodes their unique significance. Each injustice deserves its own fight, its own voice, and its own resolution. For example, the Asian indentureship and the Caribbean reparation movement may both stem from historical mistreatment, but they are not the same. The relocation was different. Their free will was different. Their working conditions was different. Their trauma left behind was different. Treating these experiences as interchangeable within a unified bloc risk oversimplifying history and undermining justice. True reparative progress requires precision, not political convenience. Ultimately, post-colonial states do not share a uniform historical experience of colonialism. The ways in which different powers governed, the length of their colonial rule, and the legacies left behind vary. Because of this, attempts to form a single, unified political and economic bloc fail to account for deep historical differences that shape each state's identity because different colonial experiences lead to national identities. Some post-colonial states gained independence through prolonged armed struggle, while others transitioned relatively peacefully. These differences produce contrasting national narrative, which makes cooperation difficult. Research across post-colonial societies show that post-colonial relations and attitudes toward former colonizers vary widely because of differences in how colonial rule was experienced and remembered. In some Asian contexts, like Hong Kong and Macau, people may still hold positive or neutral attitudes toward former colonizing powers. Whereas in Indonesia or Malaysia, historical feelings are shaped by different colonial encounters. This diversity makes it hard to find a common historical basis for unity. Another example is Barbados, who remains a constitutional monarchy under the British Crown until 2021, when it transitioned peacefully to a republic. The shift was collaborative, not confrontational, with continued diplomatic, economic, and educational ties with its colonizer. Although the Prime Minister may attempt to persuade you that post-colonial states are solidarity, neocolonial states believe they can take over. By pooling from the Prime Minister, by pooling their finances and their sources, they can form a unified bloc to counter neocolonialism. But we, the opposition, refutes this statement because the birth of the CARICOM Reparations Commission 10-point plan for reparative justice, this plan shows to address the specific needs tied to each Caribbean nation's colonial history. Also, therefore, we oppose this motion not out of opposition, but to cooperation. But because the current reality shows that deeper unification risks magnifying exists inequalities, diluting accountability, and replacing external neocolonial pressures with internal power imbalances. Mr. Speaker.
All right, thank you very much. That was the first speaker from Club CV Bethel. At this point in time, we're going to engage into that exciting period of cross-examination I was telling you about. So let me tell you how it is going to flow. So the team in opposition will pose 3 questions to the team in proposition. Each question can last no more than 10 seconds, and each answer will last no more than 45 seconds. Of note, for the team asking the questions, only one individual on the team can ask a question at any given point in time. However, for the team that is answering the question, the entirety of the three-person team can respond to provide a fulsome answer as long as it lies within that 45-second constraint. After opposition has posed their three questions to proposition and proposition has answered them, we will flip the arrangement and allow for proposition to pose their three questions to opposition, and opposition will answer those questions. So with that said, we now open our mics and invite the first question to be fielded by Team Club CV Bethel.
The first question would be, when block members disagree on economic priorities, whose interest takes precedence, and why should smaller states accept that?
Can I have a repeat of the question, please?
When block members disagree on economic priorities, whose interest takes precedence, and why should smaller states accept these precedents?
Well, to me, that's where the level of communication comes in. Because if it is the government of each country was to sit down and come up with a decision, not saying that the smaller countries won't be heard, but as again, a sense of communication. If you speak about the pros and cons and we settle onto one solution, that makes everybody, you know, equally involved in everything.
All right, thank you so much. The next question is, how is replacing dependency on former colonizers with dependence on a regional bloc, not just neo-colonialism, under a different name?
You can repeat, please.
How is replacing dependence on former colonizers with dependence on a regional bloc, not just neo-colonialism, under a different name?
Well, instead of putting everything that we have onto bigger states such as the United Nations or the United States, why not come together as one? As I said in my debates, when we come together, we are no longer a collection of islands, but a continental force. And using that continental force, right, we would be able to release ourselves from that leash of begging bigger states for aids, for simple things like food supplies and stuff. But we could depend on our continental force and be able to build as one Caribbean instead of depending on outsiders.
The last question is, without strong internal industries, how do weaker post-colonial states sustain themselves if a united bloc reduces the external trade, investments, and loans previously provided by former colonizers?
You can repeat the question if that's okay, because I didn't get to hear the end.
Without strong internal industries, how do weaker post-colonial states sustain themselves if a united bloc reduces the external trade, investments, and loans previously provided by former colonizers?
But as I said, that's why if we come together, we become a continental force where relying on those other states will not become necessary, because each Caribbean island have a specialty about them. And if we bring that together, what is the reason for the United States and trading? Think about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Club CV Bethel. We now invite Team Proposition Goodwood Secondary School to field their questions.
Okay, so what historical evidence All right. What historical evidence supports your claim that this system has delivered just justice rather than undermine it?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Okay. What historical evidence supports your claim that this system has delivered justice rather than undermined it?
Your answer, Club CV Bethel?
Although we may not have evidence of post-colonial states, not uniting and being able to resist neocolonialism, we do have evidence that post-colonial states or states trying to unite and with different economic states and political states are not successful. This can be seen in the CARICOM where they try to work together to fight neocolonialism. However, due to internal conflicts, this motion or their advocacy to
All right, and that is time. Your next question, Goodwood.
You speak of regulating progress. Can you clearly define the economic system you are defending?
Can you repeat the question, please?
You speak of regulating progress. Can you clearly define the economic system you are defending?
We are not defending any economic system. We are stating that the post-colonial states' economic system and political systems are weak, and we believe that those countries should focus on building their economic and political structures rather than uniting with other weak economic and political states, because that unity would not be effective, because each country should focus on developing their economic state and political state first before uniting.
If unity multiplies strength, why should division be our strategy?
We are not stating that division should be our strategy. We are stating that post-colonial states should first develop their international. They should develop nationally instead of trying to work together or unite. They should build their economic and political structures before uniting. So also, in this case, unity does not ensure strength and power, because all these post-colonial states are weak and they need to develop themselves first. There is no unity in this situation. And we are stating that after each country...
And that is time for your answer. Your next question, Team Goodwood.
Excuse, is it okay if I speak on something that they just said, please?
Unfortunately not, but you can respond to it if you so desire in your substantive speech. But the cross-examination is solely for questions.
Okay, next question. Okay. Why should geography divide or influence when our interests are shared?
You can repeat the question, please.
Why should geography divide or influence when our interests are shared?
there are no although interests may be shared among post-colonial states, their experience with colonizers are different. The times that they experience exploitation are different. And if we unite them, it could possibly dilute reparations, and it could possibly cause each state to not be recognized, or their reparatory justice may not be state specific.
All right, thank you very much, ladies. That was the first period of cross-examination. At this point in time, we're going to invite the second speaker from Team Goodwood Secondary School to extend the case for side proposition. That speaker is Destiny Weeks.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the opposition will tell you that the Caribbean is too small and too scattered and too dependent to ever be truly formidable. They want us to remain accommodative forever, the world's playground, forever its cheap pantry. But that argument only works if we accept weakness as permanent. We do not. They are looking at our past. We are speaking to our potential. We are no longer a collection of islands. We are a continental force. Through consolidation, our resources move from being the stools of our exploitation to the instruments of our strength. At present, our exclusive economic zones are vast, yet treated as an unprotected space. Foreign trawlers and deep-sea mining corporations move through Caribbean waters with confidence because they know individual states lack the legal and enforcement power to stop them. This is not a coincidence. It is exploitation made by easy fragmentation. But when Caribbean states act together, we control one of the most strategic maritime corridors in the world. By pooling resources and authority, we stop merely hosting international shipping and start governing it. We regulate access. We enforce our laws. We set the terms. We are no longer a collection of islands. We are a continental force. The same imbalance exists in energy and strategic minerals. Guyana's oil, Trinidad's natural gas, and Jamaican bauxite are treated as separate prices to be claimed. When we negotiate alone, we are pushed into agreements that leave us with environmental risks and long-term debt while others walk away with profits. But strength changes this dynamic. Regional coordination allows us to process, refine, and add value within the Caribbean itself. At present, we export raw materials instead of finished goods. By changing this, we move from being price takers to becoming price setters. Tourism, too, has long operated as neo-colonial structure. Foreign-owned hotels imported supplies and profits that leave the region as quickly as they arrive. Caribbean states have been expected to remain endlessly accommodating, even when that accommodation costs us dignity and control. But when we act collectively, the rules change. Access to the Caribbean beauty is no longer granted individually, it is negotiated regionally. Standards are set once and they apply everywhere. No corporation can play one island against another when the Caribbean speaks with one voice. Mr. Speaker, vulnerability is not inevitable. It is chosen. Today, we choose strength. We choose to turn our geography into leverage and our resources into authority. Because when we move with purpose, we are no longer a collection of islands. We are a continental force. Mr. Speaker, the path of isolation leads back to the change of 1825. The path of consolidation leads to the throne of the future. The opposition defends the bars of our individual cages. We say no to the Caribbean basin of war, duress and visa revenge. We offer the keys to the kingdom.
POI.
We choose the strength, of the family table, we choose the power of the block. We choose to finally be free. Remember this.
You accept?
What?
Why should we combine our GEP when our finances are not stable? Focusing on
Hold on
Can you
one sec.
repeat? Can you
Do you
repeat?
accept the point of information, Team Goodwood? We pause the time for a sec. A point of information has asked, do you accept or decline?
Yes, we accept.
Okay, you can go ahead, Club CV.
why should we combine our GEP when our finances are not stable? Focusing on Haiti, who was forced to pay a substantial amount of reparations to France, which crippled its economy for generations to come.
Okay. When we pull our burdens and pull our strengths, we become one. Why are you so
You can continue your speech.
We choose the strength of the family table. We choose the power of the block. We choose to finally be free. Remember this, we are no longer a collection of islands. We are a continental force. I beg to propose, Mr. Speaker.
Goodwood.
And thank you very much. That concludes the second speaker rather, from Team Goodwood. That was Destiny Weeks. Now, to extend the debate for Team Club CV Bethel, we invite their second speaker, Jada Lindsay.
Mr. Speaker, honorable adjudicators, members of the House, the Deputy Prime Minister may attempt to lure you into thinking that being unified lets us be a contentious force, but like a flawless glass pane, truth stands transparent once you dare to look through it. We, the opposition, aren't saying we should be solidified. We are saying each post-colonial country should grow its national development. So when they come together as a bloc, they could decrease neocolonialism. The opposition rejects this motion because history shows that unity on its own does not dismantle neocolonialism. Instead of breaking unequal power structures, unified blocs of post-colonial states often operate with the same global systems that originally enabled exploitation. As a result, neocolonial influence is not eliminated, it is reorganized. At the heart of this debate is the government's mistaken assumption that unity automatically produces strength. This weakness is reflected clearly in historical attempts at unity. The Senegambia Confederation, established in 1982 between Senegal and the Gambia, aimed to unify defense, foreign policy, and economic planning. In theory, this partnership should have increased regional strength. In practice, it collapsed by 1989 due to power imbalances, incompatible economic priorities, and distrust between governments. Senegal, as the larger and stronger state, was perceived as dominating decision-making, while the Gambia saved few tangible benefits. Moreover, history shows that unity without structural strength produces limited outcomes, particularly in the pursuit of reparatory justice. For decades, regional blocs such as the African Union and the CARICOM have issued unified declarations condemning colonial exploitation and calling for reparations. Yet, these collective positions have rarely translated into concrete reparatory outcomes. Despite shared resolutions and moral consensus, former colonial powers have largely avoided legal or financial accountability, demonstrating that unity alone lacks the power to provide reparatory justice for each member in the bloc. Moreover, rather than marching together toward financial freedom, post-colonial states remain shackled by competing interests and elite self-preservation. providing that unity against neocolonialism is more idealistic than achievable. According to the International Monetary Fund records, many post-colonial states have relied on the IMF leading since the 1960s, often repeatedly. These loans were tied to structural adjustment programs that required governments to cut public spending, privatize state assets, and open markets to foreign investigators. While blocs may negotiate collectively, they still operate within a global financial system controlled by institutions dominated by wealthy nations. Historically, Robert Jenrick, a British politician, has pointed out that many African kings opposed efforts to the abolishing of enslaved Africans, showing that even within affected regions, leaders sometimes resist collective action when it threatens their own interests. The same risk exists today. If countries begin competing over aid, influence, or recognition, cooperation breaks down. Caribbean Dynamics Overview. Political GDP per capita growth is estimated at around 1.4%, slightly above the Latin American average 1.1%, and below that of advanced economies 1.8%. Judges, when financial freedom is already so limited, is it reasonable to accept Caribbean nations to turn down tangible economic opportunities? Instead of focusing on resisting neocolonialism, the bloc risks turning inward, arguing over who deserves what. This means unity does not change.
Some information, please.
Yeah, correct. I accept.
Right. So at one point, sorry, it came so late, but at one point in time, you said that how a country came, is it not like they came together and eventually they flopped, right? Is that so? Right. If we look at Europe, right? They became a group.
Order, you have 10 seconds to ask your question.
So it's not like a response to it, right?
No. So we'll count that as not having been a point of information. You may continue your speech, Club CV Bethel.
This means unity does not change who controls capital, credit, or global trade routes. Economic power remains external, and neo-colonial influence persists through debt and market dependency. Furthermore, some post-colonial countries have experienced vastly different political outcomes. For example, in a Cornell University article, India has maintained a long-standing parliamentary democracy, while Nigeria has experienced repeated coups and political upheavals. Or let us look at our brothers and sisters in Haiti. In July 2021, President Jovenel Moïse, the president of Haiti, was assassinated. This heinous crime has plunged Haiti into accelerated institutional decay. Armed groups took control of 80% of the capital. Crisis and Institutional Collapse in Haiti by Robert Fatten Jr. These differences show that post-colonial states do not share the same needs. Forcing them into one bloc risks creating unfair outcomes in which stronger members dominate decision-making and weaker countries are sidelined. Unity does not automatically mean equality, and this diverse...
That is time. Thank you very much. That was the second speaker from Team Club CV Bethel, Jada Lindsay. We're going to enter into the second period of cross-examination now. And we're going to invite the team in proposition, Goodwood Secondary School, to pose their questions.
All right. If post-colonial states are trapped in IMF systems dominated by wealthy nations, doesn't that prove unity is even more important to resist neocolonial control?
You could repeat the question again. We didn't quite catch the first part.
If post-colonial states are trapped in IMF systems dominated by wealthy nations, doesn't that prove unity is even more important to resist neocolonial control?
We are unique countries. Each individual state has its own political and economic values and states and that they are in. We are trying to grow them and make them stronger. We are not saying that we do not need a bloc. We just want each state to become stronger and to grow as a country so that they can individually so that they can fight neo-colonialism as one stronger bloc than a bunch of weak blocks together, a bunch of weak states together.
And possibly after each country have strengthened themselves individually, they can remove themselves from under IMF's control.
Okay. How long should countries wait to develop nationally before cooperating regionally?
We cannot give a specific time frame, but that time frame would depend on how weak or damaged each country is, on how long it takes for each country to develop themselves. So the fact that each country is different, it will take a series of time for each country to be able to become economically strong. And after this point, then they can unify as a bloc.
And 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 like in Haiti, what I said, like in Haiti, this how President Jovenel Moïse, the president of Haiti, was assassinated. So it take more time for Haiti to recover from that such a loss for their governing leader to die and leave them just like that. So they have to take time
Indeed.
to get.
And then, all right, thank you. Indeed. And your final question, Team Goodwood.
Does one failed regional experiment invalidate all form of regional integration?
Repeat that, please.
Does one failed regional experiment invalidate all form of regional integration?
No, it does not. But the evidence of the states of the post-colonial states proves that these countries must develop themselves individually first. We believe that blocks should be created, but it should be created after countries have developed themselves individually first. We do not dispute the fact that uniting could be powerful, but we are just saying that uniting will only be powerful when countries focus on themselves and develop individually.
Okay.
All right, thank you. And thank you to both teams. That was the first period of cross-examination ended. At this point in time, the debate is going to pause for just a minute so that the reply speeches can be perfected. This will be the team's last shot to prove to them and to us why they have won the debate. That 1 minute break starts now.
1 minute has elapsed.
Indeed, and thank you very much, my very able timekeeper. At this point in time, we're going to conclude the debate. And to do so, first for team in opposition, CV Club Bethel, we invite their third speaker, Virginia Miller.
A united bloc of post-colonial states may sound powerful in theory, but strength is not created simply by grouping countries together. When deep structural problems already exist, unity alone cannot solve them. Rather than weakening the call for justice by merging these post-colonial countries, we must commit to fairness and healing that honors each affected community separately. The first speaker of the proposition stated that if Haiti and Cuba have formed a united bloc, their colonizers would never see a good day. But Speaker 1 of the proposition have refuted this point by identifying that every Caribbean nation has experienced colonization differently in time and intensity. Haiti's post-independence clearly demonstrates this point. Haiti was forced to pay France and its economy was crippled. The root of Haiti's misery. The economic state of Haiti completely differs from Cuba. Therefore, a united bloc between these two countries would not be effective. Firstly, reparatory justice cannot be effectively achieved through a unified political or economic bloc because colonial harm was inflicted unevenly and requires country-specific accountability. A collective bloc cannot reverse such targeted historical loss, nor can it ensure that former colonizers are held responsible for the specific harms they cause to individual states. Secondly, forced unity risks reproducing internal power imbalances, creating a new form of neocolonialism from within. Power does not disappear when nations unite. It simply shifts. Stronger economies and politically stable states are likely to dominate decision-making, while weaker nations are sidelined. Distinct historical injustices, such as African enslavement and Asian indentureship, cannot be collapsed into a single narrative without erasing their unique experiences. Treating unequal histories as interchangeable weakens justice rather than strengthening it. The Prime Minister of the proposition has stated that post-colonial states uniting replaces vulnerability, but this point has been proven invalid by the second speaker of the opposition, who have stated that in unified blocs, they still operate within a global financial system controlled by institutions dominated by wealthy nations. Therefore, highlighting that vulnerability still exists in unified blocs because these wealthy nations overshadows smaller states. The Deputy Prime Minister states we are focusing on the past and not our potential, but because of our past, we have limited potential. What about Haiti, who was forced to pay a substantial amount of reparations, and they are forced into debt for generations to come? What potential does Haiti have when their economy is broken? The Deputy Prime Minister proposes that post-colonial states should become one, but the opposition leader have already stated that specific needs are needed to reach each Caribbean country's individual needs. Finally, post-colonial states do not share a uniform historical or political identity, making deep unification impractical. Different colonial rulers, methods of governance, and paths to independence have shaped contrasting national narratives and political realities. While some states transition peacefully and maintain cooperative relationships with former colonizers, others endured violent struggle and prolonged instability. As a result, unity without internal strength risks magnifying inequality and dependency rather than dismantling neocolonial influence. Speaker.
And thank you very much. That was the final speaker from Team Club CV Bethel. And now to conclude this debate, we invite the third and final speaker from Team Goodwood Secondary School, Mr. Faith Charles. Rather, Miss Faith
Miss
Charles.
Fatal.
The floor is yours, Faith.
Mr. Speaker, I sat here listening to the opposition, basically belittling this motion by describing our unity as a risk or a burden. Mr. Speaker, they reduce our people to figures on a page and they call that wisdom. They clearly have forgotten and without a doubt they have overlooked the very soul of the Caribbean people. Together we stand, divided we fall. In every corner of the region, from the hills of the Blue Mountains to the plains of the Rupunini, there is a time-honoring tradition. It is the moment when the extended family gathers, when every auntie, cousin, and neighbor brings one ingredient to the pot. One brings the ground provision, another brings the seasoning, and one brings the wood for the fire. Separately, these are just scraps, but together they create a feast that can sustain an entire community. I ask you, Mr. Speaker, which post-colonial family has not experienced this? Which of us does not know that we survive precisely because we share our burdens and we pool our strengths? Because unlike some islands that prefer to drift solo, we know that survival comes from rowing together, not waiting for the tides to decide our fate. This isn't just fellowship, it is our greatest strategy for survival. And yet, the opposition wants us to abandon this wisdom at the border. They want us to sit at the global table as beggars, hoping for scrums from our former masters rather than bringing our own chairs and our own feast. And I must commend my fellow opponents for putting down the phone and stop dancing the jiggy to focus on our history. The opposition leader stated that we want to take over, but when did we say that? We want to simply unite to resist neocolonialism, not boss each other around. We simply want to pool our resources to become stronger. The opposition said that the country should stand alone. But why stand alone when we can unite together? Because no island survives alone. We survive because we share our burdens and we pool our strengths. Because as my fellow members have stated, we are not a collection of islands. We are a continental force. Why is the opposition so against unity? Why? They say post-colonial states should work on their burdens alone. But that ignores the reality of those burdens. Debt on fair trade, and multinational exploitation are not individual problems. Asking countries to solve them alone is like asking one person to fight a system designed against them. Come on. Coming together gives us the tools to actually solve those problems. They say that unity is idealistic, but what's unrealistic is thinking that fragmentation is actually going to work. Let's be real here. But let me lastly remind the opposition that we are here to strengthen and unify political and economic blocs. In closing, the opposition offers a world of managed decline, a world where we cling to the fragments of independence that doesn't even allow us to protect our own citizens' visas and our own maritime borders. We need to simply open our eyes and realize that no country survives alone. We survive because we share our burdens, we stand together, and we move together. Unity is our power. And together we cannot be beaten. Because we are not a collection of islands, we are a continental force. Think consolidation, think unity. And together we stand, divided we fall, I propose.
And thank you very much. That now concludes this debate. The judges are going to excuse themselves to another space and will return to you shortly with the outcome of this match.
Black boys,
Go to school and learn.
harassment, facial,
Destiny Weeks.
Goodwood Secondary School, Tobago.
Gibsonian gypsy from Sweet T&T once penned the ruinous effects of colonialism on the little black boys. We need reparation in an apology admitting that the devaluation of blacks and natives through slavery and genocide continues to be socially destructive and economically confined.
Good afternoon, TV Bethel Tobago. Today's special is reparations. Why? Because true equality is impossible without accountability. Because what was taken must be restored. Because justice delayed is justice denied. Because time does not substitute for what's owed. Because we still face the effects of slavery every day. Because we want to bring justice to the table.
The Center for Reparation Research is thrilled to launch this international reparation debate competition. This international reparation debate competition that we launched today for secondary schools is one of our most important projects. How do we engage youth on matters of reparatory justice? The change needed in the education system can only be advanced when the youth are engaged and their voices are heard.
Why is reparation so important in and for the Caribbean? Because time comes for justice for our ancestors. Time comes for the Caribbean to insist on the right to development, to be compensated for the violence against our ancestors. So outreach to the young people who have joined this movement is critical.
There is no mass movement that isn't a youth movement. And we certainly want reparations to be a mass movement. So it's really exciting, though, to have a regional / international debating competition. And I'm looking forward to your participation as you construct your arguments for and against, remembering that the 10-point plan for reparatory justice is our guiding framework for the areas in which we are demanding compensation, because we certainly want to impact the public opinion and awareness in Europe. So it's fantastic to have the United Kingdom participating as well.
So why is it important for youth to be involved in the reparation movement? Being involved in the reparations movement is critical to youth if one is to know their history so that they can understand why their societies are functioning as they are today. The future of the countries we live in are dependent on the current situation that exists today in our countries. And these current conditions were created by the past, including indigenous genocide, African enslavement, indentureship, and colonization. Being involved in reparations is about seeking justice, seeking a way to reduce inequalities in our own countries and then in the broader world. It's about seeking a more peaceful and balanced world, where global problems are solved in partnerships, not in isolation. I believe the sponsors are hoping this competition will allow our youth to gain knowledge about the past so that as young people, you'll be able to make better decisions in the future and make our countries better places.
We know that we need to understand stories about people that look like us. So the fact that so many of you young people have registered was so encouraged by your enthusiasm and your passion for wanting to enter this debate. It is so important. It's just at the core of who we are, that we need to understand where we come from, understand our true history, and having a debate competition on this particular topic is such an important milestone. To have a real conversation about repair, and the fact that our young people were so articulate with their presentations, and to ensure that we keep educating our young people, because you are the future of us and are the Caribbean's a sustainable future. So congratulations, everybody.
We are looking forward to the debate, encourage everyone to join the debate. Thank you so much all.
Education about the history of the oppression of a people can either be a tool for liberation or a tool for reinforcing trauma. What allows for education to be one or the other is not the topics taught, but how they are delivered. Therefore, we, the proposition, would like to firmly state that teaching the history of the transatlantic trafficking of enslaved Africans, or TTEA for short, does significantly more harm than good, not because of the topic, but because of the current pedagogical approach taken. Your average high schooler learns about the transatlantic trafficking in enslaved Africans through a rigid, standardized curriculum. They are taught by a teacher who is expected to simply deliver information, often in a lecture format, and test students on their ability to memorize facts, years, and names. In this setting, students are not invited to engage critically with the material, ask difficult questions, or relate the content to their own lived experiences. Instead, they passively receive a version of history unable to truly process its relevance, impact, or emotional weight. Where is the opportunity to understand how this horror shaped the blood in our veins and the names we carry? There is none. Students memorize facts and regurgitate them on paper. But inside, the lesson lingers, that the history of the African diaspora is one of subjugation, and that their place in the world is to suffer and survive, not to lead, not to thrive. This is exactly what Paulo Freire, in his work The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, described as the banking method of education, where students are treated as empty accounts to be filled by the teacher. Freire believed this model was fundamentally oppressive because it prevents learners from becoming active participants in their own liberation. It discourages dialogue, reflection, and consciousness raising. This is what he calls conscientization. The teaching of the transatlantic trafficking in enslaved Africans today in many classrooms still follows this harmful pattern. When this topic is taught in a banking method that assumes dichotomy between human beings and the world they live in, Freire says an individual is a spectator rather than a recreator. This kind of teaching doesn't empower, it conditions students to fit into a world shaped by oppression rather than resist it. And that is why we say it does more harm than good, because it teaches history in a way that keeps students passive, not engaged. We learn about Oladoye Ekiano, we learn his name, we learn that he experienced this and he wrote an account, but do we open the book and study it and analyze it and discuss it with our teachers the way that Israeli schools discuss Elie Wiesel's Night of the Holocaust? The opposition says they want students to learn about the slave trade and the enslavement of a people. And of course, we all want all students across the world to have reverence for this grave and absolutely horrific period of history. And we do this with the intention that learning about it can empower them to challenge the lingering legacies of racism and inequality. However, defending the status quo, which our opposition seeks to uphold and claims offers us more good than harm, will not offer us this. This is not remembrance. This is not reverence. And when you trace the system back to its roots, you realize that this is not our system at all. Accepted.
The fact that students today are not just learning about the brutality, but also about the resistance, the rich civilizations before slavery, and the ongoing legacies, creating empowerment more than harm.
Right. Our issue is not with these topics being taught, but it is the way that they are taught and the way that they are emphasized with regards to all of the other things that are occurring within African history. To continue, our education system was inherited from Britain, a colonial power that had no interest in nurturing Caribbean identity or liberation. And what good can we expect from teaching this topic when we are continuing to do so in England's pedagogical approach? Even worse, as you mentioned, African history is taught in the Americas and Europe as though it began with slavery. From primary school, students are introduced to African people not through the glory of their kingdoms, their intellectual traditions, or their achievements, but through their chains. Why is it so hard for you to name a single black figure whose legacy is not defined by resistance or white oppression? Why is it that we teach about Toussaint and Nani but not Imhotep, Mansa Musa, or Queen Nzinga in the same breath? This should be taught first. And compare this to how the Holocaust is taught in Israeli. This is taken from the Israeli Ministry of Education.
Point of information.
Declined. Children are introduced to the brilliance of their culture first, their thinkers, their faith, and their resilience before they are taught about genocide. Their oppression is contextualized within a legacy of strength, not as the first chapter. If that isn't a pedagogical problem, then what is? When slavery is taught primarily as a story of powerlessness and victimization, with the current banking method of pedagogy, it does more than inform. It deeply affects the psychological development of students, particularly those of the African diaspora. During adolescence, a critical time for identity formation, as described in Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, students are particularly vulnerable to internalizing messages about their race and their place in history. If the dominant narratives they encounter emphasize subjugation or this constant need to fight without also highlighting pre-colonial civilizations and agency, students may inherit a sense of trauma and inferiority. Claude Steele and Joshua Aronson's 1995 concept of stereotype threat shows that students underperform when they fear confirming negative stereotypes about their group, a common experience for Black students navigating a curriculum saturated with ancestral suffering. In classrooms where Black students only encounter these narratives and are rarely offered examples of greatness before colonial times, they are more likely to fear confirming negative stereotypes about Black intellectual inferiority. And yes, this study found that this did significantly reduce their academic performance. In contrast, we argue for emancipatory pedagogy, which views students as active co-creators of knowledge and encourages reflection, dialogue, and transformation. We want students to read and discuss the first accounts, and this should be a mandatory part of the curriculum, not an option. Additionally, students should be first met with pre-colonial history that showcases the richness and strength of Africans from various tribes and kingdoms before delving into the horrors of the slave trade. Through student-centered dialogic approaches, this topic becomes not a detached narrative of victimhood, but a pathway to critical consciousness where students develop an internal locus of control, a sense of pride, and the tools to challenge injustice. When classrooms prioritize empathy, voice, and critical inquiry over memorization, the teaching of the TTEA can become what Freire calls a practice of freedom, not oppression. We are fully justified in arguing that teaching the history of the TTEA causes more harm than good on the basis of the heavily flawed pedagogy. In parliamentary debate, motions like this are evaluated based on the status quo, meaning how things are actually occurring now. As such, the opposition cannot shift the debate by suggesting that in some ideal future it could be taught differently or argue on the basis of the principle. We are debating the present, and the burden is to defend the way that it is taught now. Thank you.
All protocols observed, the opposition remains resolute against the motion. This House believes that the teaching of the trafficking of enslaved Africans causes more harm than good. We in the opposition agree that there are flaws in the method, but we argue that even in its current form, teaching this history does far more good than harm. We accept the definitions posited by the opposition with the exception of the word harm. Harm caused by the teaching of the trafficking of enslaved Africans in this case is more like temporary discomfort that fosters long-term justice awareness and healing. The proposition burden is to prove that the act of teaching this history is inherently harmful, even when taught well, and that these harms are so deep and widespread that they outweigh all educational and social benefits. We must prove that the current approach generates more harm than good, and 2, the harm is not inherent to the method but as a result of poor implementation, and 3, that the teaching of enslaved Africans creates civic awareness, empathy, prevention of recurrence, and general social progress. The status quo, the history of the transatlantic trafficking in enslaved Africans is already being taught, but with growing care and impact. Students today are learning not just about the brutality, but also the resistance, the rich civilizations before slavery, and the ongoing legacies of inequality. Yes, some schools get it wrong. Reform is being done for more inclusive, trauma-informed, and empowering education, making it the norm. Mr. Speaker, we are not for the current way of teaching this history. The motion didn't state the current way. We are for the best way of teaching this history. Allow me to rebut. And this best way is trauma-informed teaching. This would be training teachers to handle emotional topics with care, no graphic reenactment, use check-ins, and create safe spaces. This builds resilience instead of re-traumatizing students. And 2, balancing the story. Don't stop at brutality. Teach about African civilization, resistance leaders like Nani of the Marus, and achievements of the African diaspora that restores pride and identity. 3, we would center real voices, use person accounts, African scholars, and cultural sources to humanize the content and shift away from cold textbook trauma and link the past to the present, which will let students reflect through debate, which is already being done, and modern connections to racism and justice. This transforms discomfort into action and purpose, including Black educators. Involve Black voices in teaching is as authenticity, prevents tone deafness, and build trust. in diverse classroom. This is credible as the RUN program has a similar approach, and it has proven to be working, as it has a 94% increase in the racial unity and empowerment. Allow me to rebut the misconceptions provided by the government. The government stated that teaching of trafficking of enslaved African causes discomfort and psychological harm. But let me say that discomfort is not harm, Mr. Speaker. And the 2019 UNESCO states that students taught slavery alongside resistance have greater empathy and understanding of justice. And secondly, discomfort is necessary for growth and historical reckoning, just like the Holocaust education or genocide studies. They also stated that the current method does not include the history before slavery. But Mr. Speaker, let me say that this is a big misconception. Most syllabi incorporates the history of the Africans before they were colonized. We don't learn about slavery before we learn about Mansa Musa. We don't learn about slavery before we learn about Songhai Empire. It is in the rationale also
Points of information
that the teachers should use discussions to actually engage the students. In today's debate, I will bring two substantive. One, the current methods build civic awareness, empathy, and critical thinking. And two, discomfort from learning is not the same as harm. It leads to empowerment. My second speaker will discuss justice and the prevention of repetition in the injustice, while my third speaker will prove why we remain supreme. Our first substantive is the harm lies in the method, not the content. My first warrant is balanced teaching that includes stories of resistance and survival, reduces emotional harm and builds empathy. When we emphasize both suffering and human dignity in the trafficking of enslaved Africans by teaching resistance, African agency and survival, we shift from trauma to empowerment. It does more harm than good because it builds pride, resilience and understanding. For example, the Holocaust education isn't taught by showing only images of death camps. They come with stories of resistance, survival, and moral courage. It fosters pride, empathy, and moral courage instead of guilt or division. That's why balanced, trauma-informed teaching benefits are supreme. My second warrant is effective, safe teaching already exists and work. We're seeing programs like Facing History and Ourselves offer concrete evidence that teaching hard history can be both emotionally and safe, intellectually enriching. According to a 2021 RUN Corporation study, students in these programs which is a reform program by the way, show that 94% increase in civic agency, meaning they felt more empowered to take social action and reported deeper empathy, stronger historical understanding, and more open-minded attitude. And the fact that we're seeing this in real classroom, Mr. Speaker, proves that harm is not inherent to the topic. It's about how we design the curriculum and support teachers, and we are currently doing this now through reform. If we have models that work, and we do, then the moral burden shifts to improving delivery, not erasing the content. What my third warrant is suppressing this history causes more harm than good. Mr. Speaker, be aware that we're not talking just about the current history. We're talking about the teaching of the history overall, because that's what the mood says. In environments where slavery is ignored or downplayed, misinformation spreads like wildfire. Students grow up believing that slavery was minor, that racism is just a mere relic of the past, or that systemic inequality is simply an overreaction. This ignorance sustains real-world harm, and contrary to this, we're seeing that countries like Germany, who have faced their history head-on with regards to the Holocaust, show lower levels of historical denialism and far-right extremism than those that whitewash. The impact, it promotes social equity and activism, because when students learn this history accurately and empathetically, they become more socially aware, engaged, and ready to challenge injustice. And two, it empowers empathetic, informed citizens who are empowered to fight modern injustice. And three, it protects future generations from repeating injustice. My second substantive is silence enables racism to thrive. My first warrant is when schools avoid teaching slavery, they leave students with distorted or incomplete narratives. In the absence of formal education, when students are left to piece together understanding from biased media, peer opinions, or online misinformation, the result is a deeply distorted view of race and history. A 2018 SPLC report showed that only 8% of the U.S. high school seniors could identify slavery as the primary cause of the Civil War. When students believe that slavery was a voluntary arrangement or that racism ended in 1865, it undermines every effort to promote justice and equality today. Silence gives racism plausible deniability that it suggests falsely that if we don't talk about injustice, it must not exist. The impact, it ensures future generations. And with that, And with that, the proposition momentarily rests.
400 years ago. 400 years ago, my people were dragged from their homes, tribes, families, placed on floating wood, and shipped across the Atlantic to what would be later described as the most inhumane act of all time. Cold, dark, uncomfortable, cannot describe the trip in ships where whips did not fail to miss. Injustice, rape and disgrace, blood rains, brute, force, ignorance, hate in their veins. Sweat and tears, labor revealed, produce from king fields only for the esteemed. 400 years of eroding one's pride, culture, heritage, value. 400 years of the iron chain, stringing up, leaving bare. Oh, but they never cared. Why fight when you would be met with sharp blades? So don't you dare cry out in fear. Why not plan escape with the plaiting of one's hair? Oh, the drums, listen, dance, communicate. For tonight we fight a battle not even death could spare. Blue eyes, white skin, master said there's beauty within. But guess what? Black, brown, gold, royalty, reparations we are owed. Them say hassa, but we say cassava. That's where we get the strength from to beat and conquer. For tonight we're returning to Ghana. You may say I'm a descendant of slaves because of the rich melanin that gushes from my pores. But I came to tell you tonight, I am not a slave, rather the descendant of kings and queens. I am the embodiment of the divine. I do not chase, I align, I attract. What's meant for me already has my name on it. I am the personification of beauty, the expression of love, the creator of life, the acknowledgement of freedom. So go ahead, call me what you want, because when I die, bury me in the oceans where my ancestors jumped from the ships, because they knew death was better than bondage.
This is something that I wanted to discuss since Emancipation Day, but did you know that Britain only finished paying for slavery in 2015? Yes, 2015 as in 10 years ago. This fact was revealed in a since deleted tweet back on February 9, 2018 by the then Her Majesty's Treasury. In 1833, Britain borrowed 40% of its national budget, £20 million, to finance the Slavery Abolition Act. This act was the official end of British slavery and went into effect on August 1, 1834. The money that was borrowed was used to repay British slave masters for their quote-unquote loss of property. However, for the enslaved, there was no repayment and no form of compensation was offered. The amount that was borrowed, the £20 million, was equal to £2.2 billion in today's money. The since deleted tweet from Her Majesty's Treasury pointed out that the taxes paid by people today was used to repay the loan that paid the slave masters. This would mean that people from the Windrush generation and their descendants, people from Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago and other British colonies, would have helped to repay the loan taken out to pay the people who enslaved their ancestors. Using this video, I want to highlight that when people say that slavery was so long ago, 400 years ago, ancient history and we should get over it, we can see that it wasn't that long ago. If we look at a timeline of the history of Barbados, we can see that chattel slavery in Barbados lasted 207 years, whereas the time from emancipation in 1834 to today is only 191 years. So as a nation, we spent longer in slavery than we've spent free. I want you to think about that. Facts like these are why people have started a call for reparations to correct an injustice done to us as a nation, a region, and a people. If you want to learn more about reparations and how you can be involved, click the link in my bio.
What you take, give it back. Stolen riches, give it back. My name, you changed that. Your hate, keep that. My land, where's that? Green pastures now flat. Your greed did that. My religion, you stopped that.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. The judges have come to a unanimous decision as to who the winner of this match is. And so the scores ending this round, 259 points for the winning team to the losing team's 254 points. So what did we hear in this debate? We heard from the team in proposition, Goodwood, especially from Anna Marcella, this idea that we need a regional integration so that we ourselves can become a collective bloc, yes, against neocolonialism. And she told us two reasons why, right? She told us that one, because as it exists right now, we need we need more stability. Yes, we need the ability to collectively bargain against our other countries. And we get the idea as well that when we get regional integration, we can argue as a bloc. And what actually happens in status quo is that the sovereignty of the different CARICOM countries are actually being used as a weapon against them. They gave the example, for example, of tourism. In the tourism sector, if an individual says, well, I'm not going to bring my hotel to you because you're wanting to tax me, I'll bring it to another Caribbean country. And we heard that when we operate as a collective bloc with regional integration, then we can get that kind of defense against those sort of bad outcomes. We heard from the team in opposition, particularly from Andrea, this idea that, well, actually, the problem is that we can't function as a united bloc because we have shared differences amongst us. They told us that even though we were all enslaved, even though we share a similar history, there are intricacies within that history that make it particularly difficult for us to be united as a bloc. On both claims, the judges thought that both needed a lot more warranted. For example, we wanted to understand how regional integration works. What does it look like? We wanted to understand the key terms in the debate. What is neocolonialism? Right? What is a post-colonial state? What does an economic bloc look like? These are things that we definitely thought we needed to hear and understand in the debate, particularly from the first speaker in her role as Prime Minister. And so these are questions that the judges felt that needed to be answered. Similarly, from Club CV Bethel, there were still questions in our mind. Questions like, what about these different the differences in our trauma or in our experiences makes it so that we just can't unite in a collective front? See, it's not sufficient to tell us that even though we were all victims of colonization and enslavement, it was done in different ways, therefore we can't proceed or we can't unite in a block. You need to tell us what those differences are specifically in great detail, and more importantly, because you did do a little bit of that, what you needed to do a lot more is tell us why those differences make us being united particularly difficult. I think, for example, of the island states in the European Union and England, they had big differences, and yet still they were able to participate in the European Union, yes, to some great extent. And so we wanted to understand, Club CV Bethel, what are these differences and what about these differences make it so that what we generally want as a collective bloc, freedom, independence, money, infrastructure, and development, what about these differences makes it impossible for us to be in accordance and agreement to that? The debate went on a little bit further with some more interesting claims, ideas about self-preservation being the primary focus of this new collective bloc and how that is going to cause all sorts of problems. Questions about the fact that even if we cooperate collectively, we hear these ideas from Jada, even if we operate collectively as a bloc, we're still going to be beholden to these big companies. We think these are interesting claims. We think they need to be warranted out a lot more so that we can fully understand what you mean. All right. And so when again, the idea of claims, destiny, strings, we can hold a strategic maritime power in the Caribbean Sea. That's a really interesting idea. Why is that important? Why is that powerful? Why is that interesting? Why does it matter that the Caribbean states, by virtue of forming a bloc, can have some sort of control over the maritime passageways? How much goods and trade flows through our Caribbean maritime space? How is it that when we control those as a collective bloc, we can get better results? What about being a bloc helps us to get those better results? So again, a lot more warranting needs to be done. The last thing I'll say before I announce the winners is the particular question of mutual exclusivity in the debate. The Goodwood Secondary maintains their burdens of proving why we need to be a collective bloc. In the latter parts of the debate, Club CV Bethel started to violate that mutual exclusivity by telling us rather, that, well, we need to become stronger independently before we become a bloc. But see, if the ends are the same and the means are different, then the debate cannot be had because we're both debating the same outcome. Goodwood says become a bloc now. Club CV Bethel says become stronger and then become a bloc. And so what we have is both teams defending the motion, which is questioning whether or not we should become a bloc in the first place. And so, ladies and gentlemen, after the judges spent some time and really dived into the debate, we were able to conclude that the winner of this match and the team that will be moving on to round 2 of the International Reparation Debate Competition for 2026 is a team in proposition Goodwood Secondary School.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Goodwood. We see them on camera there rallying around the West Indies. The best debater from this match comes to us from the winning team, Goodwood, and that is their second speaker.
We did it. We're not hearing.
Yeah.
We can't hear. Technical difficulties. Okay, always. Yes, so we can hear now.
Yes, the best speaker comes to us from Goodwood Secondary School, and that is the second speaker, Destiny Weeks. Congratulations, team Goodwood. Well played, Club CV Bethel. Team Goodwood, some words in the spirits of complete sportsmanship.
We have some help. So what did you say?
I was just asking for some for you to virtually cross the aisle and congratulate your opponent.
Oh, congratulations to the opposition. You all were amazing. You all gave us a battle. And as we continue to push forward, just continue to do what you all are doing. You all are very well.
This is not the end.
Thank you so much. Thank
Your
you.
debate was amazing, and we are proud of you all. Even though we don't know you, we are proud. It was amazing. And good luck to your future endeavors.
Tobago.
Tobago.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the third match. Join us in a few where we will be having the fourth match in the round 1 of this competition. 2 more teams will be vying to ensure that they enter into round 2. Those 2 teams are, of course, San Fernando Central Secondary School coming out of Trinidad and Tobago and the Knox College coming out of Jamaica. They will be debating the motion. This House would exclusively pursue infrastructural development as a form of reparation. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your day.